Good evening. My name is Mary Bishop Wade.
And my name is Brandon Slaughter.
And we are reporting live to you from CNC News on March 16, 2016.
We have reports on the genocide that occurred in Yugoslavia and the independent state of Croatia. In case you haven't tuned in with us until now, here is some background on the conflicts happening overseas.
The independent state of Croatia was founded in 1941 when the Axis powers invaded Yugoslavia and created Croatia as a puppet state of Nazi Germany.
The ruling power in Croatia, known as the Ustasi, committed widespread genocide during World War II. The ideology of the Ustasi movement was fascism, Roman Catholicism, and the Croatian nationalism. The movement emphasized the need of a racially pure Croatia.
This promoted the genocide of Serbs, Jews, Gypsies, and anti-fascist Croats. This map shows the location of the country of Croatia and the location of Jasenovac. George will be reporting to you live from Jasenovac, the largest concentration camp of the Croatian genocide.
Thanks, Mary Bishop. I'm here live in Slavonia, Croatia at the Jasenovac concentration camp. This camp was established by the Ustasi regime during World War II. It is estimated that near 100,000 people were murdered here between 1941 and 1945. Jasenovac is known as the most brutal and horrifying concentration camp in recent history. Unlike camps in Nazi Germany, the killing here was much less systematic, with victims facing gruesome deaths such as pure execution upon arrival. Guards here, according to my sources, were brutal and heartless. Jasenovac guards took bets to who could kill the most prisoners. According to a testimony, one of the guards named Peter Berserka slit the throats of 1,360 prisoners in one night. Now back to the desk.
Thank you, George, for that live report. The camps were certainly frightening and resulted in the killings of thousands of people.
We will now transition to live video footage in Croatia during the Ustasi regime. Ante Pavelić, fascist leader of the Ustasi regime, was given his leadership position by Adolf Hitler. Here, Pavelić is seen shaking hands with Hitler, thanking him for taking measures to protect the newly founded independent Croatian state by establishing the Ustasi regime. As the leader of the military occupying force in Croatia, Pavelić established many laws that encouraged the discrimination against Serbs, Jews, Romas, and some Croats. In 1933, Pavelić and the Ustasi regime presented the 17 principles that formed the ideology of the movement. The 17 principles emphasized the importance of the Catholic Church and the need to either convert non-Catholics to Catholicism or kill them. The principles stated that Jews, Serbs, and Romas could not serve in state or local government, and they described the places within Croatia where minorities were allowed to go. The principles also encouraged a strong autocratic ruler, and it discouraged both capitalism and communism.
Thank you, Brandon. A strong anti-Nazi resistance movement existed during the Croatian genocide. The Yugoslav partisans, or more formally, the National Liberation Army and Partisan detachments of Yugoslavia, were commanded by Marshal Joseph Tito. The partisans had two objectives: to fight the Ustasi occupation force and to create a multi-ethnic communist state in Yugoslavia, where all types of people are represented and respected. Amid the political and social chaos that resulted from a military occupation, the Yugoslav partisans worked hard to organize anti-fascist groups and political forces into the nationwide uprising to bring down the Ustasi regime. On July 4th, 1941, Tito made an official plea to the people of Yugoslavia to join together against the Axis powers. Tito declared that peoples of Yugoslavia, Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, Montenegrins, Macedonians, and others, now is the time. The hour is struck to rise like one man in the battle against the invaders and hirelings, killers of our peoples. Destroy everything that is used by the fascist invaders. By September 41, only 2 months after Tito's call for help, there was an estimated 70,000 partisan resistance fighters in Yugoslavia. Back to the desk.
Thank you, Jake.
Now to Nishant with more information on the resistance.
Thank you, Mary Bishop. I'm here with Joseph Tito, leader of the resistance movement in Yugoslavia and Croatia during World War II. Joseph, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
How did you become the commander of the partisan resistance movement?
Well, I joined the CPY, or the Communist Party of Yugoslavia, in 1920. When the Axis powers invaded Yugoslavia in April of 1941, I responded by creating a military committee within the General Committee of the CPY. Many people were against building a resistance army, but I believe that the people of Croatia must unite and battle against the occupying forces. I was appointed Commander-in-Chief of all National Liberation military forces later that year.
How did you gain support?
As in any war of resistance, people joined our movement because they shared our belief that the occupying forces must be brought down. Tens of thousands of young people and adults came to us within the first few months of our creation to join us in resistance. Our biggest support, however, came when the Allies recognized us as a legitimate liberation force in Yugoslavia at the Tehran Conference in 1943. Following this recognition, the Allies set up the RAF, the Balkan Air Force, with the aim to provide increased supplies and air support for us.
Do you think the Partisan resistance was a successful movement?
Yes, I do. Our guerrilla-style campaign hit-and-run battles succeeded in taking back large chunks of occupied territory.
Thank you, Nishant, for that interview. The Croatian genocide and the Nazi-enforced Holocaust had similar endings. Because the Ustashi regime was created by German Nazis, the regime lost their power when the Axis powers in Germany lost World War II.
After Germany's surrender to the Allies in 1945, Ante Pavelić, fascist leader of the Ustashi regime, detached from the group and fled Croatia in 1945 and died a few years later in Spain. Several other members of the militaristic government fled. However, many were captured and sentenced to death or long-term imprisonment. The Jasenovac concentration camp was liberated by Allied forces on April 22, 1945. Less than 100 survivors lived to tell the tale of the Jasenovac concentration camp. However, tensions between Croats and Serbs did not end at the end of World War II.
The Croatian War of Independence, which began in 1991, proves that tension still remains. For 4 years, Croats and Serbs engaged in war and mass killing over whether or not Croatia should be granted secession from Yugoslavia. In addition to political tension, religious tension remains in Croatia as well. While Catholicism is dominant, Eastern Orthodox Serbs, Jews, and Muslims force themselves to exist together.
Now to a testimony from a native Croatian who has experienced the existing tension in Croatia firsthand.
Miss Eisen was unable to join us in the studio for an interview, but she has sent us the answers to our questions. When asked about the tension between Croatians and Serbians, she responded, "Once the war broke out in 1991, I began to hear stories about some of our family members not approving of intermarriage. My parents lost some friends who seemed to have a problem with it all of a sudden. Also, many families who intermarried had a hard time adjusting to the now overt animosity between the Serbs, Croats, and Bosnians. She believes this tension is a result of the conflicts of World War II and the fact that the Croatian government sided with the Ustasi while the Serbians did not. When asked how the tension affects society, she writes, "When I was a kid, everyone vacationed on the Croatian coast. Now it's rare to see Serbian tourists there, especially in towns like Dubrovnik that were shelled during the war. The majority of the people who lived through the war cannot forgive. Intermarriage between the Croats and Serbs is difficult to bear for most families. The conflict made Croatia weaker overall. The country of Yugoslavia was doing so well economically and had strong infrastructure. Now things are in economic decline. Now back to the desk."
Thank you, Mrs. Eisen, for your fascinating interview.
We appreciate you tuning in to CNC News.
Have a good evening, everyone.